Are you ready to take your message, your business, and your life to the next level?
Want to learn from someone with more than a decade of experience, training tens of thousands of people from all around the world?
Hi, Cliff. This is Pauline from Auckland, New Zealand.
John from Calgary, Alberta.
Amy Porterfield.
Michael Hyatt.
Dan here from Dunedin, New Zealand.
Ray Edwards.
Mark Mason.
Mike Stelzner.
Pat from Smart Passive Income.
It's Darren from Melbourne, Australia.
Now is the time to live the life of your dreams and do the work you feel most called to do in the world.
Welcome to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show.
Here's your host, Cliff Ravenscraft.
Welcome back, my friend. Today, I have a special piece of content for you. I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning. First time in a very long time, by the way. But I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, and I came down to my office, and I began to do this process of journaling. And all of a sudden, thoughts began to build within me, and I came to the realization that there is a very specific area of my life where I've experienced a lack mindset, a shortage consciousness. Now, what you're about ready to hear is something I just finished recording. In fact, I'm just opening up an intro here to introduce this because when I hit the record button, I didn't quite know until the end on whether or not this would be an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show or my private Train with Cliff audio journal podcast, which, by the way, you could learn about at trainwithcliff.com. But anyway, I've decided that this episode is going to be an episode of this, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and I'm not going to set it up because it was intended to set it up right from the beginning. So I just wanted to say hello, welcome back to another episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and here's what I've recorded for you in this episode. In this episode, I want to share something that I've been experiencing lately. I call it a shortage consciousness. Now, this would be the opposite of an abundance consciousness. Now, typically, I tend to lean towards the mindset of abundance, but occasionally, I become aware of certain thought patterns and unconscious beliefs that become conscious through a series of triggering circumstances in my life where all of a sudden I realize, wait a second, there are still certain beliefs and thoughts that are habitual patterns that have come up from my past that cause me to experience what I lived with most of my early life, which was this lack consciousness, that there's never enough, that I need to collect everything and hold on to it tightly instead of allowing the flow of life and its gifts and its experiences to just naturally flow to me with great expectation that more wonderful things are to come. And what I've been experiencing lately is a desire to give up this shortage/lack consciousness, or this fear that things will stop flowing to me in a very specific area of my life that has caused, on some level, a little bit of stress, a little bit of potential overwhelm. And on another level, it has created for me an experience where I find myself stalled. I find myself stuck and overwhelmed by how much there is to do for me to be able to continue to do the things that maybe I have committed myself to doing, even if that commitment wasn't something I consciously stated, I'm going to do this. But somehow I began going down a path that is now creating a bit of overwhelm, and there's far too much flowing to me for me to save everything. Okay, I understand you may not yet, Cliff, where are you going with this? What are you talking about? This will all make sense as I tell you that this is all about trying to capture every piece of wisdom, every insight, every fresh new nugget of truth that comes to me, whether it's through a book or a podcast, a YouTube video, a course, a conversation with a mentor or a coach, or everything. I just want to take it all and document it and have it in this place where it can be stored. You see, today we live in a world where you can document everything. I mean, every piece of information, every insight, every word from our experience of life can now be recorded, saved, and potentially be revisited at a later time. For me, by the way, before I go into when this all started for me, today you may have heard of phrases such as the second brain. I have adopted this philosophy of creating a second brain. I've never really liked the term second brain all that much. I've considered it more along my database of knowledge, or my knowledge database, or my knowledge base. This is where it is a repository of all the things that I have highlighted and documented and stored, because I have this high level of belief that at some point I will want to retrieve whatever it is I'm storing here in this location. I'd like to have the ability to easily type in a key phrase or a keyword and instantly be able to find the source of where I once heard that statement when I was at a platform conference in Dallas, Texas in 2012. For example, when Amy Porterfield was on the stage and she said, fill in the blank. And I have it captured word for word, exactly what she said. Have you heard about the knowledge bases? Have you heard about the second brains? Have you already gone down the path of starting to create one of these for yourself? I have. In fact, for me, this really got started back in 2016. I went to Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within event with my wife. And just before going to that event in June of 2016, I had purchased an audio program from Tony Robbins called Creating Lasting Change. Now today, I've listened to that 10-day audio program nearly 40 times. And prior to going to Unleash the Power Within in June of 2016, I had probably already listened to Creating Lasting Change, the 10-day audio program, 2 times. Then I went to this 4-day Unleash the Power Within conference. And this was exactly at the same time when the iPad Pro 12.9 inch was being, it was very popular. It was released, I think, in late 2015. But here was this iPad Pro on my top of mind. It's like, wow, if I had an iPad Pro, like all of my friends have an iPad Pro with their Apple Pencil, I would have this very large 12.9 inch screen that mimics a letter-sized notepad of paper almost identically. I could begin to write down and capture all of my notes. And oh my goodness, I'll never forget just how much mental anguish I had going to Unleash the Power Within, knowing that I could go and get one of these now. They're back in stock. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't have enough time before we actually get on our flight to head to Dallas, Texas for this event. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm taking Stephanie, and I had promised myself to create an experience for her. It was the first time I ever bought full first class tickets on an airplane, and we bought ourselves a nice suite to stay in Dallas. And I just wanted to take her out to nice dinners and all this other stuff. And I happen to know that Stephanie's favorite thing to do is not find the local Apple store in Dallas, Texas, and go buy an iPad. So as a result of the fact that there wasn't enough time for me at the time to order an iPad and have it delivered before going to the event, I went to this event and I captured as much as I could just typing in notes on my iPhone, which was fine. It was working, and I also wrote notes inside of the actual UPW workbook, the physical workbook that they gave me. And what happened was I chose not to go to the Apple store to buy an iPad because that would, in my mind, take away from this special experience of the time with Stephanie. So when I got back, by the way, the last day of the event, I ordered the iPad so that it would arrive the day after I got back from Dallas, Texas. And it did. And that began my knowledge base, second brain, if you will. It became the place where I was going to start storing all of these incredible insights that are having such a deep and profound impact in my life. So I began dabbling with 2 different apps, and still today on the iPad, I go back and forth between 2 different applications for note-taking. One is the Notability app. I really have a lot of reasons why I love this app for taking notes for individual coaching sessions, for just individualized little documents of notes here and there. But then I also use GoodNotes. Currently, I'm a GoodNotes 6 user. And with GoodNotes, the functionality that I like there is the ability for me to create a notebook, a single note, if you will, that contains thousands of pages and is easily searchable by just typing in a key phrase or a keyword into that one document, and everything is in its own place. And so trying to figure out which one of these do I use, going back and forth, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to store long-term stuff inside of GoodNotes, and I'll originally start writing them over here in Notability, and then I can export it from Notability into GoodNotes. So the whole idea is, let's just say I'm listening to an audio program, and I'm writing down my notes as I'm listening to it. And I want you to imagine me. I'm sitting there with my phone and I click play on the audio player that's playing this MP3 recording that I got of the program. And then I hear a couple of sentences and then I hit pause and I go and I write down basically what I've just heard. In essence, transcribing nearly every single word of this 10-day audio experience. Now, this is way before we had a lot of the technology tools that we have today that are readily available. There were transcription tools available at the time, but for me, I didn't want to just transcribe these audio files into text files and then copy and paste them. For me, there was something about the idea of hearing these words spoken in audio form and then going over to my iPad. And by the way, sometimes I had done this in written journals prior to having an iPad. But the idea of having an iPad is that it's searchable. Everything, because these note-taking apps can recognize your handwriting. And even though it's my handwriting, I actually have really good handwriting. But because it can read my handwriting, the idea that I can go in and do a search in that app for something that I had written, that is amazing. And that's why I prefer that over the physical journals that I used to keep. But there's something about the idea of hearing the words that I just heard that resonate deeply with me. I'm like, wow, this is profound. As I'm hearing these words, I feel an experience of how this shifts my perception of my past and will shape my experience in the future. I feel that deep within my soul. And because there's such resonance with what I'm hearing in audio form, I'm now going to take the time to physically write on this page what I'm hearing. And so what I'm doing is I'm now taking what I just heard, because I've hit pause, I'm processing it in my mind, and now I'm beginning to instruct my physiology to send neurons of precise measurement to move the Apple Pencil tip in such a way that it will recreate the exact symbols on this page that will represent what's going on in my head. And by the way, those exact symbols, we call them letters or words. And that's exactly what's going on here. And because I am hearing it, and then I am thinking about it, it's now permeating through different areas of my brain. And then I'm actually instructing that vibration of thought energy to be translated into minor neural movements that will cause my fingers to move a pencil in such a way that the tip of the pencil will create words on a digital page that I can then see with my eyes, which is yet another intake of the information. It is just driving it so deeply within myself that I embody this at a different level than if I just clicked play and just listened to the thing through. Not that there's anything wrong with just listening to a thing through, and not that there is anything wrong with me just clicking play, being just as moved or feeling just as much resonance with the message, and then hitting pause and thinking about it a little bit. But there is something special, something extra involved in the process of actually doing the physiology of writing it. Now, typing it can be powerful as well. I have to do the same thing with my brain if I'm doing this in a digital form where I want to type it into a piece of software like a note-taking app such as Notion or Word or Evernote or OneNote or whatever else tools and services that you use out there to type your notes. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. There are less precise moments, I think, required, or moments. Let me say that again. There are less precise movements that are required in your physiology to type the symbols onto a digital page compared to the physical movement of a writing instrument that has to have all of the different movements. So I can make an argument of why wanting and desiring to write something down in a writing format versus typing format, it does even have a little bit of a deeper impact. It takes a bit more time for me to write things out than it does for me to type. I can type incredibly fast. So there's just something about that process that I enjoy, and it's something that I began, like I said, in June of 2016. I began doing this on a daily basis. Now, prior to that, I had been journaling for many years, but it really took off when I had this digital device. And now that I had my iPad 12.9 inch, the iPad Pro, and my Apple Pencil, I was writing every day. And then what I realized is that when I'm having conversations with friends and clients and in mastermind groups, every now and then somebody would say something and I'm like, oh, I just wrote about that the other day. Let me read to you this quote. And I go and I look for it. And then lo and behold, it's like I find it pretty much instantly. And people are like, wow, that's a great quote. Who said that? And I said, well, it's that quote is attributed to Maya Angelou. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. And so they're writing it down. And I'm like, this is cool. This is great. This is really helping me bring forth some of these things that have inspired me and that have helped me shift my perceptions. And now I'm sharing it with others. Wow, this experience tells me that maybe I want to be a little bit more intentional about this. So while initially my note-taking was about just the process of ingraining the insight deeper within my being, and I don't know if ingraining is the right word, but I think you follow what I'm saying. Deepening that by not only hearing it or reading it from a book on the page of a book, but then, and by the way, when I do a Kindle book, I'm literally going through and I'm highlighting. So I read the sentences on the page of the book. I highlight those, and then I want to go to my app and I want to start writing what I just highlighted. And then sometimes I'll write my additional notes and thoughts related to what I just read, highlighted, and then transcribed into my notes. Now, again, what I was getting at is initially, this was all for the purpose of me, not necessarily to come back and revisit this all the time. In fact, throughout the years, there's only certain bits and pieces here and there that I actually do ever go back to. Now, occasionally I come across something, I'm like, oh, I want to create a training resource out of this. This is something that's not only impacted my life in such an incredible way, I already know how I am going to use this to teach others this process as well. And I'm going to document it very specifically for the purpose of sharing it with someone else. Now, that's a slightly different level of what I'm talking about as far as this creating a second brain / knowledge base. And so there's even that level. And I have always specifically created tools and documents that I can easily share as a PDF in the past, but now I basically just share a link to Notion, because Notion is the app that I use as of today in April of 2024. If you're listening to this in August of 2030, I don't know if I'll still be using Notion or not. Who knows? But there are these different levels of wanting to save every insight, every word, and every experience, and just document it. So this is what I'm sharing with you. This all began for me in June of 2016. And it's only increased over time. Now, around that time, I began experiencing an intense desire to begin what I call early morning routines. And these have come and gone in various different seasons of my life. Currently, I may be in the beginning or at the midst of the beginning of a new season. This morning, I woke at 4 a.m. and I came down here and I instantly started journaling, which by the way, is what inspired me to come here and share this with you, this podcast episode. So my experience has deepened throughout the years. And when I would have these early morning routines, it would not be uncommon for me to wake up anywhere between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning and invest the first 3 to 5 hours a day, every day, often 7 days a week, coming down to my office, or if I'm not at home, if I'm traveling, going somewhere where there's a quiet, alone space that just feels amazing, where I can read or listen to an audiobook, or I can watch an online course or some other source of great wisdom, knowledge, that will provide insight within me and shift my perceptions, help me expose myself to maybe help me expose limiting beliefs that I have, expose me to more empowering beliefs that would be indicative of what would be needed for maybe life at the next level for me. And so imagine, since 2016, 3 to 5 hours a day, 7 days a week of me doing this process of, let's just say, watching a 15-minute YouTube video and taking about 45 minutes to an hour's worth of notes on that video, or reading, let's just say, 10 paragraphs out of a single chapter, not even finishing the chapter, for about 20 minutes, but then taking 30 minutes to an hour to write my notes on it. And doing that for 3 to 5 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes for as long as 9 months in a row before I get out of my early morning routine. And when I say I get out of my early morning routine, means there are some seasons where I start getting up at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And in those seasons, the amount of time spent doing this activity of reading, studying, note-taking, and documentation might actually be reduced somewhere between 1 to 3 hours a day at times. So that has been my experience. But here's what I will say. While we live in a world where it is possible to document every piece of information, every insight, every word that we want to save so that we can revisit later, in many ways, it's a wonderful gift, but the ability to capture everything, for me, can birth a mindset of scarcity, a shortage consciousness, a consciousness that clutches tightly to every nugget of wisdom, fearing that it might be lost. Now, that just occurred to me over the last several days. And what I'm sharing with you here is that my instinct to save and note and archive every detail of what I've learned has a lot of value on many levels. But at some point along this journey, I have kind of crossed over into, wow, I am finding myself so caught in this allure of documenting everything out of the fear of it not being instantly recalled, that this compulsion has led to an overwhelming clutter of information that now seems to sometimes distract me and to detract me from the essence and joy of learning itself. And I've been exploring, especially this morning as I was journaling, I've been exploring how this shortage consciousness has not only burdened me with an overwhelming need to document everything, but it has sometimes caused me to just stall in the journey of learning itself. It's as though the beauty of experiencing knowledge as it flows to me just isn't enough. And that if it's not worth having that if I can't document everything. Now, for me, it's not a problem of whether or not I can document everything, because I can. In fact, today, I don't know if you've been browsing any sort of social media channels where there's this advertisement for a thing called the Plod Note. Now, I don't think that I have any desire to have a Plod Note myself, but the concept is that you could have a device that MagSafe connects to the back of your phone, and it literally is recording audio 24/7. I don't know if that's exactly what it does, but let's just imagine that this was possible. All right. And imagine that everything you ever do is captured in audio and transcribed and then documented and put in this place. And so it's like, okay, so it is possible. There are tools that are available. And I might think, well, Cliff, that's great as long as the conversations I'm having are with other people face to face and stuff like that. But it's only going to get one side of the conversation when I've got my headphones on and I'm doing a Zoom call. Well, I have answers for that. There are tools to record Zoom calls. There are tools to record everything. It's like, so there's no question about whether or not it is possible to document everything. My issue isn't that I want to document everything, because I don't want to document everything, but I do want to document a lot. And I think that that's great. I'm going to continue. In fact, I have a strong desire to continue to document as much as I feel inspired to document. I've never went and found myself trying to document something. It's like, man, why am I doing this? This is so much work. I don't even want, I'll probably never use this. I never document anything that feels that way. But the thing I run into is the things that I do want to document there's a great amount of it. And I enjoy the entire process. Even if I'm going to set aside, let's just say I'm going to set aside 2-hour block of time for reading/studying. And if I go in and I only read 3 pages of the current chapter of the current book that I'm reading, and I highlight all of those 3 pages, and then I transcribe them into whatever I'm transcribing them. Maybe it's going to be in Notability. Maybe it's going to be in GoodNotes. Maybe it's going to be typed into the Day One journal. Maybe it's in my Notion database for notes. And lately, maybe it's in my Notion database for journal entries, which is different than my database for notes. So the question isn't, am I enjoying the process? I'm not overwhelmed by the process of the actual flow of wisdom that's coming to me, the savoring of that as I'm thinking about it, the transcribing of the content into whatever written form, whether it's physically writing it in with an Apple Pencil or physically writing it with a pen into a physical journal, or whether it's typing it into some sort of software document editing tool. I enjoy all of that. But where my shortage consciousness has started to appear for me was in this process of trying to create a single resource, a single repository of all that I have ever created as notes. For me, what this looked like for a long time, I thought, well, GoodNotes seems to be the repository. That's going to be the place because, well, since from 2016 all the way up until I was introduced to Notion, an overwhelming majority of all of my content that I had stored as far as note-taking had been in written form. We're talking dozens of physical journals and then thousands of handwritten pages inside of my GoodNotes app. So, yes, prior to 2016, I had done a lot with Evernote, but that paled in comparison to the amount of written notes that I had. And so for me, GoodNotes was going to be the repository. It's going to be the one. I have a notebook, is what they call it in GoodNotes, with thousands of pages in it. And what I did is I took the notebook that I had created back when I got my original iPad Pro 12.9 inch. I took that document and I continued to write in it with new page after new page after new page. But eventually I recognized that I could scan images from my physical journals, and those scanned images could be put into this document, and those scanned images would get optical character recognition, OCR, and it would also be able to recognize the handwriting from the pictures or images or the scans of the written words in the pages of all of my journals. And this is going to sound a little intense, but that's who I am sometimes. I'm intense. I went in and documented and scanned thousands of pages from dozens of handwritten journals of notes that I took before I got my iPad 12.9-inch iPad Pro. And then there was a very large season of about 2.5 years where I transitioned away from the iPad and moved over to physical journals again. And I filled up another 6 or 7 journals. And then I realized, okay, the little Post-it note tabs on the side with little glossary index of terms so it's easy for me to find them became a little bit unmanageable. And I desperately wanted to be able to search the key phrases of something that I wrote. Which of these 6 or 7 journals was that in? And it's like, this is crazy. I can't find these things. And so what did I do? Another couple of weeks of my life of that early morning routine, that 3 to 5 hours a day. I went and started scanning all of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages into GoodNotes. And so I'm like, okay, let's just stay in GoodNotes. And so I started writing in GoodNotes. And then I'm like, okay, but I want to type sometimes. Sometimes I really want to document what I'm documenting, and I just need it to be faster than what I can physically write. And so I want to type it. Well, at the time, GoodNotes, the text feature wasn't appealing as a document typing editing tool. Even to this day, I don't think it can actually go from page to page to page. And the formatting wasn't terribly great. I know that they're working on improving that. They've changed a lot of things, but still, to my recollection, latest I checked, which was about 6 or 7 months ago, it's not a great tool for document editing. I typed too many things and it spread from one page to the next. I just didn't like it. So I would go over to Day One app. Day One app was an app well before I went to UPW. I was already journaling in there for countless entries. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to start journaling over here. I can type into the Day One app. And then what I will do is I will export that as a PDF and import that into GoodNotes. And that way, yes, I could go and search for it in Day One easily enough. However, the thing is when I go to search for something, is it in GoodNotes or is it in the Day One app? Or is it where is it in this physical journal? And so the idea of having the one repository, that one place being GoodNotes, I could go to GoodNotes and anything I wanted, I could type and I could search for it and I could find it. As long as I made a commitment to myself that anything I ever document goes into GoodNotes. And this was all great for a while, except for the fact that I did recognize there were a number of times I wanted to type a journal entry into Day One. And I'm like, when I finish this, do I also have the time to export as a PDF, go in and import the PDF into the right notebook inside of GoodNotes? And while that's not a difficult thing to do, it was something I was like, I'll do it later. So what I would do is I would journal, and I'm like, I'll do that later. It's like, okay, I've journaled. Now I need to go and run and do something. That's been documented. It's like, okay, I've journaled. And next thing you know, I've got like 13 journal entries in Day One that are not in GoodNotes. But now, today, I want to actually journal in GoodNotes. Oh, well, before I start journaling in GoodNotes with my handwritten Apple Pencil journaling, I need to go and get those other things. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go and insert them in the right date order later chronologically, because I want everything to be chronological, of course. Do you see where I'm coming from? And so eventually I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go export those 15 Day One journal entries into PDFs. I'm going to individually import them into GoodNotes. Now it's time for me to journal. Oh, I don't have enough time now. Let me go do something. And then I don't journal. What? Seriously? This happened to me? And so I've noticed that there all of a sudden the complexity of trying to document everything, and it's not trying to document everything. Documenting everything is easy. But what has caught me up is the idea and the desire and maybe even the compulsion that I need a single solitary source for which I can go to find any and every note I've ever had. That's where all of a sudden it's like, wait a second. Well, why do I need that? And that's what I began asking myself this morning in my journaling. Why do I need a single solitary resource? I can make great arguments on why it would be valuable, but I can definitely see how it is actually sometimes hindering my enjoyment of the flow of insight, the flow of knowledge, the flow of wisdom, the flow of learning, the flow of experiencing and documenting. Those things in and of themselves, I love to savor. I've never felt like I've ever wasted a single moment writing something down, noting it. However, I have found myself often regretting the need to take what I'm documenting now and make sure that it gets exported from here and imported into this one go-to end-all be-all source. So a couple of months back, I made the decision to go all in on Notion. This is probably almost a year ago at this point. I finally came around to the understanding of how databases work inside of the Notion app. And once I discovered that, I'm like, oh, okay. What if Notion were my repository of everything? Now, here's the thing. This is not a whole thing about which direction to go, but now that I'm on this topic, I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts related to this. All right? It's not a great idea to use Notion as my repository. Why? Because it's on somebody else's server somewhere. All right? Whereas GoodNotes is in my iPad. And if I've opened up the app somewhat recently on my iPhone or my other iPad or anywhere else in the GoodNotes on the desktop, I have multiple different versions of it. It's in iCloud on my iCloud account. And so there's all of those different variations and forms of it. Whereas Notion, if their servers go away, I have no access to it. If I have no access to the internet, I have no access to it. I have to have, their servers have to be up and I have to have access to the internet. And if I don't have either of those two, my storage of knowledge base of information is not available to me via Notion. Now, I could make an argument that I could go in and set up an export that automatically is systematically doing this once every 24 hours or once a week. I can have it automatically export a backup zip file of all of my data and save it into an Amazon S3 account or something of that nature. Sure, I could do all of that. Have I done it yet? No. Will I do it? I don't know, maybe. But why would I even concern myself with that? Except for a shortage consciousness. A shortage consciousness is the fear that it will disappear, the fear that it won't be available, the fear that that the whole process of reading, hearing, watching, learning, experiencing, and then documenting and processing and formatting and highlighting and outlining and thinking, it's somehow thinking that wasn't enough. Don't get me wrong. I understand. I benefit consistently, constantly from being able to go and find things that I've documented recently and in the distant past. It's absolutely incredible what I can share with clients when I'm in a coaching conversation or in a mastermind meeting or when I'm in a live workshop gathering with people. It's incredible what I'm able to pull up and then immediately share with them instantly. So they have the copy of it for themselves from my Notion app. Which, by the way, there are reasons why Notion seems to be a better solution for me. But what I am currently missing from Notion is the ability for me to be able to do a keyword search on anything that was handwritten. Currently, recently, I just bought a brand new iPad Pro 12.9 inch, the M2 model. With the M2 chip. So my old original iPad was starting to get a little bit of a lag when I would put my Apple Pencil on the page. Sometimes it would take a bit to catch up to what I was writing because the software running the iOS is so advanced today, and it has lots more processing going on in the background that the old processor is having a hard time keeping up. So eventually I bought myself the newest model of the iPad Pro, and I'm sitting there writing notes inside of Notability now. And I'm like, okay, so I just wrote these notes in Notability. What do I do with them? Well, what if I just let it sit in Notability? Do I actually have to export this from Notability and import it into GoodNotes? Well, I had already given up on that a couple months back when I made a decision. I'm going to start putting everything into Notion. Notion is this document saving platform where I can save all these different documents. And when I made the decision to keep everything in Notion, my question is, well, do I export everything from GoodNotes and try to get that into Notion? And the problem is Notion has no OCR, so it has no ability to recognize any of those words on any of those pages. Now, do I think that Notion may have that capacity at some point in the future? Possibly. I mean, Evernote had that as a feature since day one, and that was back when the original iPhone was released, or at least the App Store for the original iPhones were released. Not the original iPhone. I think it was the iPhone 3G. But anyway, you get the idea. Evernote has had the ability to do OCR for some time. I don't know why Notion doesn't have that. But in some way, I'm somewhat maybe thankful. Although if they did have it, maybe Notion would be the ultimate solution. I don't know. But here's what I've come to. I recognized the fact that the desire to have everything everywhere all at once, as far as my notes that have been documented, it's a little bit much. And the feeling that it has to happen, and if I don't have it somehow, in some way, things are not the way that they should be, I've discerned is a bit of a shortage consciousness. It's a lack consciousness. A lack mindset. It's a fear that this information won't be there. And so what I wanted to share with you is what came out of my processing and thinking through all of these things. And I've come up with 4 different suggestions for myself. Now, if these are beneficial to you, feel free to take anything I share with you here and run with it. Ignore anything that doesn't resonate with you. So here are 4 suggestions that I make for myself. Suggestion number 1 is to practice mindful consumption. And here's what I mean by that. I have 3 bullet points that I wrote down. First, I want to engage with content consciously, focusing on the present experience of learning, receiving, experiencing, rather than focusing on the future utility of the information. The second thing that I've written down here for practicing mindful consumption is before I begin a new book or listening to a lecture or watching a video or engaging with a new lesson in a course, I want to take a moment to center myself with the intention of being fully present. How am I experiencing and resonating with this piece of content, this information right here, right now? I believe that this mindful approach will allow me to absorb information in a way that has always resonated with me, enriching my mind in the immediate experience right there. And while this may make it less necessary to document every detail for fear of losing it, I can still document as much as I desire. But for me, I want to disconnect from the idea that if I've documented this in a handwritten journal, that somehow, for some reason, this must be transferred over to the storage in a single repository. That's what I want to get away from, that feeling in the moment. I want to actually have practice mindful consumption. I want to actually have that immediate, present moment experience, not impacted by the thought this needs to be transferred somewhere else. So that's suggestion number 1 that I make to myself. The second suggestion, I want to cultivate trust in my ability to recall and reconnect with this information later. What does this mean? I want to develop confidence in my innate capacity to remember and revisit ideas that truly resonate with me. This has always happened. In fact, there are a number of times when I have had a conversation with someone, it immediately prompts, it's like, oh my gosh, a couple of years ago, I read such and such book. Let me find that real quick. I want to read you this quote. And then I would go searching for it in Notion, only discover it wasn't in Notion. And then I'm like, hey, give me one more second. I promise this will be worth it. And then I go search for it real quickly inside of GoodNotes. And for some reason, I wasn't able to immediately find it in the moment. And I said, I apologize for the distraction. I thought I could immediately find this quote. Let me just tell you from memory what I recall. And then it would flow naturally from me. So I want to remind myself, and I want to always understand that the most impactful insights will emerge in my thoughts when they are needed. This has always been true. And so that's the abundance flow mindset of this. That information, that insight, that wisdom, that knowledge, it came to me and I processed it. I assimilated it. I began to embody it. I began to incorporate it into my being, into my thoughts, into my behavior. And as a result, it is a part of me now. And I need to make sure that I trust that my mind and soul are capable of holding on to the essential, allowing me to let go of this compulsion to document everything. The third suggestion, create a ritual for letting go. Now, I am going to play with this. And I've been playing with this already a little bit. So far, I've determined everything I put into Notion isn't going into GoodNotes. And I've already determined that there's a lot of things in GoodNotes that aren't going into Notion. But what I'm doing now is I'm finding that a lot of quote-unquote notes are occurring inside of my journal entries. And when I'm doing a journal entry and a note, for example, today I took some notes on dreams. And I was reading this book called The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. And as I was taking some notes on dreams, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I started to go and get some highlights and I copied them and pasted them and began to format them. And I went through it line by line. I put in some of my own thoughts interlaced in between those notes that I formatted. And I'm like, wow, this is a journal entry, but this should be a note. This should be a note in my notes database inside of Notion also. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here I am again. And that's what prompted this whole thing. So anyway, suggestion 3, create a ritual for letting go. So how about this? What if I were to introduce a practice of intentionally releasing the urge to capture every insight? For me, again, this isn't about the urge to capture every insight, although, do I need to capture every insight? But I do like capturing the insight. It's not so much about releasing the urge of capturing every insight as much it is releasing the urge to make sure that every insight is put into a place that is instantly findable later. That's the urge that I need to potentially begin releasing. All right. Now, I was doing some research on what other people have done about these things, and one person suggested that you could actually have a physical ritual, like writing down a summary of what you learned and then safely disposing of it, symbolizing the release of needing to hold on to it physically. And I'm like, okay, I'm not ready to go there yet. Cliff's still got some inner work to do. I'm not ready to start burning my notes. Anyway. But for me, it's more along the lines of capturing my thoughts in whatever documented form, but letting go of the need to make sure that it's all in the right database or within the right software tool or tools that I happen to be using at the time. So from this day forward, creating a ritual for letting go, what does that mean for me? And I'm going to explain it to you, but I'm also saying this out loud as a commitment to myself. From moving forward, if I write something in a GoodNotes app and it's handwritten in my GoodNotes app and I experienced great resonance with myself and I felt truly in the moment and I enjoyed the process of documentation inside of GoodNotes, and then I'm finished documenting that, I want to release and or let go of any need to then take that, copy it, and paste it into another platform of any nature. If I'm doing this in Notability and this, I want to release myself from the need to go and take this handwritten journal entry and then export the JPEG of the handwritten pages and create a journal entry inside of my journal notebook database inside of my Notion account so that I can reduplicate the title of the journal entry in the database, and then I could click on that at a later time so that I can read and from the JPEG exported images from Notability. This is what I release myself from. I release myself from this. I want to let go from this compulsion. It doesn't all have to be saved. And then with all of that being said, I still have a fourth suggestion to myself. I still want to embrace selective documentation. Moving forward, I am shifting towards a more selective approach to what I choose to document. And, while I am releasing any expectation of myself to write something down in Notability and then export the JPEG images into Notion, I'm not suggesting that I won't ever do that. It's just that I will have a more conscious, intentional choice about what I feel I will do and for what purposes I will do it. Instead of trying to capture everything, I'm going to begin focusing on noting down insights that spark a strong emotional or intellectual response within me. The thing is that I consume a lot, and a lot of the things that I consume have a deep resonance within me. And so I recognize there's a lot there. Although I do recognize that I probably transcribe a ton of stuff that doesn't need to be transcribed. And so moving forward, I am going to begin to intentionally try to be more selective in what I'm documenting. The next one I wrote down here is this is not only going to reduce the volume of material that I need to manage, but also ensures that what I do save holds genuine significance. I'm going to wrap up and just share this. For me, why did I come here and share this in an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show? It's because I know that other people will resonate with this. Not everyone, not all of you have this idea that I need to have this perfect go-to solution for everything. But maybe for you, is it that you feel like you have to read every single book to its conclusion? Do you feel like you have to wait and make sure that you've documented everything and highlighted everything and journaled about everything in the current material that you're consuming before you move on to anything new? And then the question is why am I sometimes rushing from one thing to the next without savoring what is and just being okay in the moment, devoting as much time as I desire, and then just moving on with my day, even in light of the fact that I may never be able to find what I just wrote down, but knowing that it's all still in some way, in and of itself, the energy of what that is a part of my overall experience of life. It's shaped me into this newest version of who I am in the moment and moving forward, and that I will understand and trust that I will be able to recall either manually by finding something that I intentionally chose to document selectively, or in those things that maybe I didn't document, or I don't recall in the moment where it was documented, but in embracing the fact and trusting that the impactful insights will emerge in my thoughts when necessary. There you go. That's this episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. It's just what was on my mind, my heart this morning. I need to know from you, did this resonate with you in any way? If it did, will you just let me know? Email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com, and just share with me your top insight, just one insight that spoke the most to you. I'd love to hear from you. And before I go, I want to remind you that I am available for one-on-one coaching. If you have experienced great success in your life, things that you once believed impossible are now your reality. Your dreams, as you once had them, have manifested. They've come into reality. And while you're earning more money than you've ever dreamed of earning 10, 15 years ago, you still struggle from time to time with stress, overwhelm, fear that it might go away. You feel maybe there's something more that you should be doing, and yet you just don't feel that personal satisfaction, that fulfillment. Are you struggling to move forward with something that you believe and feel called to do next? Is there any area of your life where something needs to shift, but there's just a mindset, mental block that's keeping you from making that shift? I invite you to reach out to me and ask me what it would look like for you and I to have a one-on-one coaching experience together. It is absolutely something that could, in a single conversation, radically alter your experience of your past, alter your experience of your current present moment, and could completely change the trajectory of your future. A single coaching conversation could unlock what is necessary for you to experience the change you feel called to experience. Email me today if this is resonating with you at all. My email address again, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. Until next time, I encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Mindset and